Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning into the Capitalist Cast. Today, we are joined by Representative Andrew Lewis, who had a pretty spectacular legislative victory in terms of some legislation that he was working on. I might be overstating the importance of the bill just a hair, but it's a really cool thing, particularly for the people who are interested in what their child's curriculum looks like. Before we talk about that, Representative Lewis, could you explain to people a little bit what your district is?
Sure. Thanks, Leo. And thanks so much for having me on to the live cast here. So my district is right in the middle of Dauphin County. We've got 3 municipalities here: Lower Paxton, South Hanover, and West Hanover townships. And we're about 20 minutes outside of Harrisburg City.
So and most people would consider it central Pennsylvania, even though it's not quite geographically central Pennsylvania. And it is, it's fairly close to the capital. And we get a lot of emails and questions from people about, what can they do as it relates to their curriculum of what their kids are being taught in school. They have questions, they have concerns, they can't find it. They're having to, put in right to know requests and really jump through a lot of hoops in order to get to it. Your legislation deals with some of that. Can you walk us through what exactly it does?
Absolutely. So the current situation, like you described, Leo, regulations require school districts to make curriculum information available to parents and guardians, but current regulation doesn't stipulate how that information needs to be presented or how it needs to be made available. So every school district does it differently. And a lot of parents are being told, when they try to dig in and find out, hey, what's the lesson plan, or what's my kid going to be learning next school year? They're being told, file a right to know request. Some schools do post this information online. Lower Dauphin School District and my district does a good job of this. But my bill basically just says, look, let's standardize it across the board. If you're a Pennsylvania school entity, you're going to be required to post curriculum and either a title or link to every textbook online. Make that information available to parents online. And this is a transparency bill, and it's going to make it very easy for parents. And by the way, it's extremely critical now, where you never know from one week to the next if your kid's going to be in class or remote learning. I mean, when your kid is learning online and you can't access what they're learning online, you've got a problem. And so this bill, transparency bill, common sense bill, would just standardize it across the board in Pennsylvania. Parents will be able to access this information online. And we got it done in the House just this week, and now we got to get it through the Senate.
Yeah, and it's interesting to really think about, just when you look at the public sector, when you look at government schools, essentially, versus, the availability of information, kind of the customer is always right approach, that private businesses have to take for anything really that's government related. It seems a lot of times where the attitude is, we're doing you a favor by giving you the information that you're paying for.
Yeah. And on that note, Leo, I thought the concept I thought of, it would be amazing if we had like a rating and review system like Google reviews for government agencies, and any agency that has less than, like, I don't know, a 4-star review on average, their funding gets decreased. So basically, just like in the private sector.
Uh-oh, your sound popped out. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Sorry about that. A call came in and I deflected it. So all I was saying is, if you were to tie funding to performance based on user reviews, it'd be incredible to see how performance would really go up across the government.
Yeah, and I mean it's a really interesting idea, and it's really not just related to school districts in terms of making things difficult for people to find information. It's across every level of government.
Yeah.
I know internally, when we try and find out information about, stuff like per diems and everything like that, we will get the information, but it'll be in a useless format.
Right.
I know that we've gone to the Department of State to try and look at ethics filings that people have submitted. And the paperwork is, the files are available, but the files that are available on the website, you actually need a special document reader in order to access it. And it's insane.
Yeah, it's burdensome. And it defeats the purpose of these transparency laws.
Yeah. So when we take a look at school districts, Pennsylvania has what, 500 different school
Yep.
districts.
Yep.
There's really no, as you said, there's really no standardization across them. What are some of the specifics that you're looking at? I know that you had said that you want the some of the things to be online, but can you go through exactly
Sure.
how that works?
Absolutely. Right now, there are some school districts, if you go onto their website and you start to look at classroom instructional materials, you start to go to their curriculum section, you're going to see some school districts post. Some of them will post a lesson or an outline. Some of them will post syllabus. Some of them will put in links to textbooks or the title of textbooks. Many of them, however, don't. And what this would do is every school's website would have a section where any parent could go onto it and just look at, hey, for my kids in third grade, for third grade social studies, this is what they're going to be learning, or for third grade math, this is what they're going to be learning. And it's going to have curriculum, which we defined it in the bill exactly how it's defined in current regulation, which includes instructional materials, academic standards to be achieved, any assessment type standard, and of course the link to the textbook. Very common sense. So this would all be then digitally available. So you wouldn't need a special reader, Leo, to access this. You wouldn't need to file a right to know request. You wouldn't need now. Representative Zabel, who's a Democrat, tried to file an amendment to basically say the schools could come up. They have to make it available electronically. So he redefined from online to electronically, and they'd be able to kind of figure out how to do that. And that would open the door for a password protected portal that only parents or guardians could access. And although I listened to his input and considered it, when you look at school districts, taxpayers fund public schools. So whether or not I have a child in the school, if I'm paying taxes, I'm funding the school. And so there's no reason every taxpayer shouldn't also have access to that information. So we just decided, let's make sure this is online, it's on the website, it's available to the public.
Yeah, and I think that you raise a really good point, because that was going to be one of my questions. Is this something? So I don't have any children in my local school district. If I was interested, or I wanted to take a closer look at what the school district was teaching, just as a member of the public, I do have the ability to do that. And it sounds like that's included in the bill, that it is really for the public to be able to access.
Absolutely. And some members even pointed out, look, there's school board members who don't have kids in the school. We've got school board members in Central Dauphin who may or may not who don't have children in the school. So are you telling me a school board member wouldn't have access to this information online? It just makes sense to say, look, anybody in the public, tax-paying citizen should be able to go in. It's transparency. Every other, by the way, municipality, government agency has transparency laws. If you're a county, you're posting your budget right online. If you're a municipality, you're posting meeting minutes online. You're advertising ahead of time that there's going to be a meeting. You have sunshine laws for legislation. Every single government entity has major transparency laws. And by the way, we need to improve them. But then when you look at the schools, the moment we tried to say, hey, let's make what you're teaching in school transparent, suddenly we got a lot of pushback from the other side. The teachers union opposed this publicly, unfortunately. But it just makes sense, man. The amount of time kids spend in the classroom, which is, by the way, far more time on average than they spend in their childhood with their parents during the day. The amount of time they spend in the classroom, parents really need at their fingertips, have access to understand and know exactly what's being taught to them.
Yeah, and I found it I mean, just as I was listening to the arguments against it and reading various news articles, one of the things that was brought up was, well, these are things that people can come to a school board meeting and they can learn about. And in, this day and age where information is really at your fingertips for pretty much anything that you want, to say to someone, well, we understand, you're working 10 or 12-hour days, but in order to find out what your kid is learning, you need to arrange childcare so you can come to a school board meeting and spend 3 hours going through a bunch of documents that really aren't necessarily going to be relevant to your particular child.
Exactly. And not to mention the absurdity of that kind of pushback, especially in the COVID environment, where we hear that same, a lot of folks on that same viewpoint also saying, well, we want to make sure it's easy to vote from the comfort of your home by mail,
Right.
without having to go to the polls. However, if you want to find out what your kid's learning in school, you've got, just to your point, you have to arrange transportation, drive down, figure it all out, figure out how to get in the building, go through security. It is nonsense that you would put this burden on parents in 2021 during a COVID pandemic.
Yeah, it's the idea that, well, in trying to make a public school actually open to the public is, I mean, it seems common
Right.
sense.
Yes.
But it's really, it's interesting when you take a look at, the pushback that you have gotten from not only the PSEA, so from the teachers unions. What has the response been from, because I know that there's the school board association and things like that. What were the school board, what was the response of the school board association? Like, what did this look like?
Yeah, so look, we had quite a bit of opposition, especially on the day that we were scheduled to run the bill. PSBA, Pennsylvania School Board Association, they opposed the bill, and I think they used a lot of the arguments that the PSCA had made, the teachers union had made, which was basically saying this is going to be a burden on schools, it's going to be an administrative burden. But I kind of pointed out in my floor remarks that schools already have an information technology budget. Pittsburgh School District, it's over $10 million for their IT budget. Philadelphia
Right.
School District, $4.6 million just on non-instructional information systems. These guys have the money to put information on their website. And anyone saying they don't, like, then what are you spending your IT budget on? Okay. So the PSBA, the PSEA, the alphabet soup of special interest groups definitely came out opposing this, but it was all arguments that frankly just didn't hold water, because you're looking at school districts already have fully funded IT budgets. This is just a matter of posting information. They already have to approve this information. Teachers already have to submit this information for approval, and all we're saying is just make it available online. It's not a huge, it's not as big of a deal as they're making it out to be.
Yeah, and I don't know this for a fact, but I don't anticipate many school districts are still having, or at least I hope they're not, having teachers submitting, pen and ink versions of what their curriculums are.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're not sitting down by firelight with their quill pens.
Handwriting it out, bringing a bundle of yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so one would think that these systems that they're using in order to input the curriculum or in order to create the curriculum plan for the year have the ability to, share that information and communicate across systems. You would hope.
Absolutely.
That this isn't going to be a particularly burdensome proposition. But then at the same time, if you look at it and you are a school district who is, okay, now I have the requirement that I need to be able to publish these things, then you will, as the consumer of those softwares, be able to go to the vendor and say, I now need this software to do this.
Yeah.
So, it's again, the burden's not necessarily on. It does create something where there may be, as you mentioned, you kind of got to hit a button and make sure that the systems are communicating with each other and that the websites have the capability to do it. But at the same time, this isn't something where it's not rocket science. These systems should, I know that's a horrible word to use, be able to communicate with each other. So if they're not, then that kind of represents a whole other problem that needs to be dealt with.
You're 100% correct, Leo. And the thing is, and we amended the bill to specify, just in case anyone was confused, that this would fall on the school administrator or their designee. So it's not like teachers have to go figure out how to upload it into the website. Right. It's genuinely like the IT department's going to make sure it gets on the website, just like they already do for other school issues that go on the website. But to your point, if the systems don't work and they're not communicating, then I would ask, some of these school districts, what are you spending your multi-million-dollar IT budget on? Like, it's crazy that this received the opposition it did. I felt like this is a very common sense, middle of the road transparency bill. Provides parents access to information they have the right to have. And it does it in a way that's fair. Online, which is a resource every school already has, is a website. So I was a little taken aback by just how opposed some of these groups were, and frankly was disappointed. We had no Democrat votes for this. I thought we were going to get at least some Democrats. I figured it would be a mix. It was not a mix. No Democrats were willing to support this.
Yeah, and there were even a couple of Republicans who ended up being
Yeah.
a no, which was also, it's horrifying, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I feel like this issue this issue it's a win. It's not only is it good policy, this is a good issue, but it's a frankly, parents want this. The public is asking for this. They deserve it. So I just don't understand why anyone would be.
Yeah, it's I guess it's probably indicative of the times that we live in, where it's very hard to find something where people are willing to, okay, well, this is a good idea, and it doesn't matter who's proposing the idea. It's just recognized that this is a good idea.
Right.
So this isn't the only thing that's been going on, and I know, kind of changing track a little bit as it relates to schools, and some of the things that are happening. The pandemic, some of the ways that school districts have approached it, has really opened up and created issues for a lot of people. There's also some legislation that's being considered, really, that kind of gives parents an opt-out for some of the masking requirements and things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that's being considered in the General Assembly, just to give people an overview?
100%. So there's a couple different bills that have been moving their way through that would give parents just more choices when it comes to education. But specifically with respect to mask mandates or COVID mitigation plans, to give parents choices, right? If that's not going to work for you, you have an option to send your kid maybe to another school. And so Carrie Lewis Del Rosso sponsored House Bill 1254. She had authored this very early in the year, and we kind of attempted to run it last week. And what the bill does is it basically says the bill is the underlying bill is very simple, and our goal was to amend it to kind of expand it a little bit. The underlying bill basically says, look, like, if your school switches to virtual learning, you get a voucher, and you get to basically take your education funding that is supposed to be spent on your kid, your student, and take that to another school, period. You could just go to another school. And so that was the underlying bill. And then what the hope was to expand that to say, look, like, there's also maybe some opt-out provisions for certain COVID mitigation things, and just to give parents a little more flexibility. There's a lot of parents, especially parents of special needs kids, who have very unique needs for their kids. And so sometimes when a school goes fully remote, I mean, I have constituents and their child with special needs, and just trying to take some of these tests and do them online is almost completely impossible. And so you're basically handicapping or holding back a student unnecessarily. And so Carrie's bill was designed to really to address those concerns. We had an amendment that was filed by Kurt Sonny, who chairs the Education Committee, and this amendment would have kind of started to expand that bill a little bit, give parents more options. The amendment failed on the House floor, so we were not able to pass it. Didn't have enough support on the floor, and so we kind of had to go back to the drawing board with that bill. I had filed an amendment myself. I tried to get a voucher program in that was independent of COVID. The Keystone Hope Scholarship is something I'm trying to get done in Pennsylvania, and I tried to put that in the bill just as an independent. Hey, no matter what, COVID, not COVID, here's a voucher that you can take a portion of your students' funding to a school of your choice. I think that's what every state should do. But needless to say, the first amendment we tried to file failed. Clearly, my amendment would also probably fail in that case. So we're back to the drawing board, Leo, and we're trying to figure out the best way forward on that.
Yeah, and I think that's it's sad. I mean, there's very obviously a Republican majority in the House. And there are certain things that I could see. Okay, so you start to look at some of the financial implications of giving people vouchers, but at the same time, really what's not being considered is that this money should not, and this kind of gets down to some fundamental differences in how people look at education. The funding is not for the building.
Right.
funding, it is not geographically limited. The funding is for the education of this child.
Absolutely.
So, and one of the things that I had mixed feelings about when I looked at Representative Sonny's amendment was that it was limited to a single school year. So from one perspective, that is a very understandable limitation, that they say, okay, this is only for the 2021 to 2022 school district or school year, as we're looking at providing these vouchers for kids. But at the same time, when we look at it, I would tend to, as you mentioned in your proposed amendment, really look at this from this needs to be a universal thing, where if parents are not getting the education that they need in a school district, and whether that's due to everything going to an online virtual, or some of the COVID mitigation measures that their child is not being served in that school district, we need to make it as easy as possible for these parents to really have some opportunities to educate their kids. Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, we're in the top 15, I think, in terms of per capita spending or per child spending when it comes to education. And we continuously hear this drumbeat of Pennsylvania doesn't spend enough on education. And when you look at the numbers, it's just completely nonsensical. We're way over the national average, and we're very close to the top quartile of the country in terms of the amount of money that we're spending per person.
And that's why a lot of the folks beating this drum and saying, well, you're underfunding the schools and stuff like that, they're just not looking at the math, which is that Pennsylvania on average is about $18,500 per student. The national average, to your point, is closer to $15,000. So we're about $3,000 ahead of the national average in spending per student. I'm all about
20%. If you want to do percentages, it's 20%.
Which, by the way, in a business is in some companies is 4 times your net profit at the end of the year. So it's genuinely a large percentage. But what I'll say is that I am all about fully funding public schools, but what we need is for the funding to follow the students. And that's why I'm a big believer in all the dollars being spent through the fair funding formula versus just some. And we need to eliminate hold harmless, which mandates that no matter how many kids are in your school, if you've ever gotten X amount of dollars, you can never get a penny less, right? Yeah. So if you, back in 1990s, if you had a booming town and thousands of students and you had, let's just say $25 million, now, I didn't do the math, so I'm just hypothetically saying that. And now the population drops to say 20 students. By law, you still have to get a $25 million. So we're not smartly spending education dollars in Pennsylvania. That's the problem. And we need to transfer more of those costs from fixed overhead costs to variable costs that really vary based on your student population. And the money needs to follow the students. And that's why, to me, universal school choice is a no-brainer. And I think that COVID has really highlighted the need for school choice, just really amplified how much parents need choice and how unique every kid's learning needs are. And so, frankly, I don't think we should tie the school choice agenda to COVID mitigation policies. And frankly, I honestly don't think that's the best approach. And the reason is you don't really want a public health decision being made based on, hey, I'm about to lose 15% of my funding. So you don't want those decisions being conflated with financial decisions. So just make it universal school choice, period, without being tied to COVID.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The less overlap you can have, the better when it comes to some of those funding choices.
Yeah.
And the issue of COVID, not only did it really illustrate how important choice was, but this gets back to the issue that we initially started talking about, where parents were, for the first time, sadly, really having a very comprehensive look at what the curriculum was that the child was being taught.
Yeah.
So these parents who were now essentially virtually homeschooling their children, or for all intents and purposes homeschooling their children via a school district, we're really seeing in detail, like, why is my 12-year-old being taught about these things?
And
Some of that, there's always going to be some questions about, age appropriateness and things of that nature. But just in terms of the content, and sometimes the one-sidedness of the perspective that's being presented, is really problematic for a variety of reasons. You're not, children aren't being given the ability to try to interpret nuance. They're being told, this is the thing, and this is what you need to memorize, and you need to be able to regurgitate this fact.
Absolutely. And anytime that happens with an ideology, no matter what that ideology is, left, right, center, wherever it is, that's called indoctrination. When you're essentially requiring a student to kind of memorize, adhere to, and uphold certain beliefs that are ideological, it's really not a place for especially a K through 12 education. Education should be about reading, writing, arithmetic, history, of course, social studies, but keeping it factual and informational versus ideological.
Absolutely. Well, I now that, since we came back to your legislation, that is now, it's passed the House, it's gone over to the Senate, it's been assigned to the Education Committee in the Senate. So what does the process look like from here? How does this work? Can you walk people through it quick?
Absolutely. So from here, my hope is that they bring it up for a vote in the Education Committee. That's going to be the decision of the chairman. The chairman is Senator Martin, great senator, phenomenal, has done a phenomenal job, and is a pro-school choice senator. I've reached out to him already. He said he's looking forward to sitting down and talking about it. So my hope is get that out of that committee. Once we pass it out of committee, it's got to go to the Senate floor. So then the Senate has to go through the process we just went through in the House. So my hope is we get that passed in the Senate. Honestly, I think we can do it in the next few weeks here. So I've got to look at the Senate calendar and see kind of when they're in over the next few weeks. But I really think we can get this done over the next few weeks. And then my hope is that the governor will sign it. And if he's not willing to sign it, at least he lets it lapse into law. I don't see how you can really justify a veto of a very simple transparency measure. So I'm hopeful that, just to kind of recap, a couple weeks in the Senate, get it through, get it out of committee, get it out of the floor, get it to the governor's desk.
Yeah, and to throw a couple bullet points in there. So as you mentioned, the chairperson of the Senate committee, in this case Senator Martin, will determine whether or not it comes up for a hearing, then a vote, or it can just be voted on, or what that process looks like. And then once something goes to the floor, much like in the House, where you have the majority leader in the House making decisions about when things end up on the calendar, the majority leader in the Senate, who's Senator Kim Ward, would make decisions about when things on the Senate side of the calendar get, input and brought up for a vote. As things are brought up in the Senate for a vote, there will be an opportunity for floor amendments like you guys did in the House. And then after that is over, there's like a 24-hour period statutorily, actually constitutionally, they're required to wait a certain amount of time before they can bring it up for final passage.
Right.
So there's everybody's civics lesson for the day.
You did the civics lesson much better than I did. Very, very well said. Yes. No, that's the process. And honestly,
I think Schoolhouse rocks for that. So
nice. Well, you know it better than anyone, Leo. I would say I really am optimistic. I don't see. I think with the folks we have in the Senate, we have enough support to get this done, and I think leadership will support this. I'm very confident we'll get it out of the Senate, and then we really got to get it. Hopefully, get a gubernatorial signature on this.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, even if he doesn't sign it, as long as he doesn't veto it, it will become law in whatever 10 or 14 days, I think.
Correct. Correct.
So there is, and it wouldn't be the first time that something has lapsed into law.
Sure.
There've been quite a few things that the governor, made a lot of sound and fury about that he wouldn't sign. He didn't veto it, and it became law anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that would be
that's a win.
Yeah, that's for sure. Would still get it enacted into law, which is the key.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day today.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we really hope to see this legislation make its way quickly through the Senate. So fingers crossed. This is a no-brainer kind of thing that parents should be able to just find out what
100%.
parents and taxpayers in general should be able to find out what schools are teaching without having to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to find it.
Absolutely.
So, thanks for introducing this. Everybody, thank you very much for tuning in this afternoon. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future.